Welcome to the SEI Podcast Series, a production of the Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute. The SEI is a federally funded research and development center sponsored by the U.S. Department of Defense. A transcript of today's podcast is posted on the SEI website at sei.cmu.edu/podcasts.
Hello, my name is Suzanne Miller. I'm a principal researcher here at the Software Engineering Institute. Today, I'm joined by Marisa Midler and Tim Shimeall, both analysts within the SEI CERT division. Today, we're here to discuss their latest work in ransomware, which we have seen a spike in over the last year, both in the number of ransomware cases and their severity. And they will explain what ransomware is, if you haven't heard about it yet, and also some of the reasons why this may be happening now and things you can do about avoiding ransomware in your future. So I want to welcome both Marisa and Tim. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks, Suzanne. Like Suzanne said, I am an analyst for the SEI's CERT division and the situational awareness team.
Yeah, and I am also an analyst at the CERT's situational awareness team here at the Software Engineering Institute. And ransomware in general is malicious software that is geared to extort funds from a victim organization. So classically, what it does is once it connects to your system, it encrypts data and then says pay, or we won't give you the decryption key. And there's been some more recent evolution in that threat that we'll talk about as we go through the podcast.
Yes, some really interesting things. So before we get into that, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourselves and the work you do here at the SEI, and what is it that led you down this path to actually be studying ransomware in the current situation? So Marisa, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Well, I am actually newer to the SEI. I've been here for a little over a year now, and I have worked on a wide assortment of projects, ransomware being one of them. But my background before the SEI, I was a software engineer, so I still get to do some software development projects here, but I also do operations and virtualization projects, and I've also done some iOS security research.
And I've been at the SEI just a little bit longer than Marisa. I started in April of '99. And I've done a number of different projects for the SEI during that time period, as you might expect, including some of the situational awareness software that we use on a day-by-day basis to analyze network traffic and deal with stuff. And that network traffic was where the situational awareness team started, but we go beyond that. We look at malware and malware characterization, such as we're discussing in this podcast. We also look at technique development and coming up with new ways to inform decision makers about the state of the network or the threats against the network. And we've also done a variety of data analysis and data publication to keep people informed about what's possible in the modern networking environment.
We've also done some stuff with training, and we've developed workflows to standardize analysts' methods of going through and working through the different problems.
So a lot of different activity related to networks and situational awareness. And I think that frame of situational awareness is really one that our viewers want to be aware of, that the SEI isn't just looking at one aspect of malware. We are looking at kind of lots of different aspects, so that when something new, like some of the ransomware things we're going to talk about, comes about, SEI is a source for information about that.
Yeah, and we also have SEI also has a couple of other teams that actively work in related spaces to this. There's the vulnerability analysis team, which is looking at the characteristic vulnerabilities that some of this malware uses. There's malware analysis team that actually looks at the code of the malware and exactly how it works, exactly what's being done, and how malware might relate to malware. And there's the insider threat team that is looking at some of the ways that people are tricked into accessing malware by phishing messages and so forth.
Okay, excellent. So I do want to set a little bit of framing for why we're doing this podcast. One thing, ransomware cases are on the rise. It's in the news. New York Times reported earlier this month in October of 2020 that a woman actually died from treatment delays after a hospital in Germany was hit by a cyber attack and they were forced to turn away emergency patients. So, that's a pretty severe kind of result from a ransomware attack. There was also a coronavirus vaccine trial that was bogged down and delayed because researchers were locked out of their data, which is a common aspect of a ransomware attack. So you've talked about the spike in these kinds of cases in your recent blog post. So help our viewers understand what's going on and what's behind this increase in ransomware attacks.
So ransomware is predominantly motivated by money. Cyber criminals want the money, and they've seen that ransomware is an effective way to do this. Organizations have been put in the terrible position that they need to pay the ransom in order to get back access to their hospital systems or the research that these people were doing for the COVID vaccine. Just no, I don't know if these specific instances actually paid the ransom. I'm just using it as an example. But in April of 2020, the RSA conference was going on, and Supervisory Special Agent Joel DiCapua presented research that he's been doing over the past 6 years. I think it was from 2013 to 2019. And he basically tracked the ransomware Bitcoin wallets. And he discovered that these different ransomware variants have collected over $140 million over those 6 years. And when he was finishing that in 2019, Ryuk was collected $61 million in ransom.
Those are just amazing numbers to me. I mean, we think about, ransomware. When you hear about ransomware, you think of, you hear about, somebody asked for $30,000 or $60,000 or whatever. But this kind of number, 140 million over 6 years, is the kind of number that makes criminals pay attention to this as a vehicle for their criminal activity and for getting criminal funds. And so that I think is really important to note that this is not going to go away in the near term. There's just too much money involved.
Exactly. And he even noted that it's likely even more money because he didn't have access to all the ransom notes and all of the Bitcoin wallets. So it's likely even more.
Well, and ransomware is shifting. Back when it began, it was really more directed towards individuals. I have your home information, I have your checking account information, pay up. It's moved to predominantly be focused on businesses and government entities. Cities are getting hit. And when your police and EMS are out, that's very, very impactful, and it motivates people to pay money. And so they can demand larger money. So several cities in Georgia got hit in the last year.
And going back to how you said that woman's death was linked directly to the ransomware attack, it's honestly likely that there have been deaths that haven't been able to be linked because of these EMS services being down. And it's just you can't really know, but that probably has either affected people's health in ways that we couldn't directly connect to a ransomware attack.
So what's the increase like in recent times? Because that's one of the things that prompted your blog post, I think.
Yeah, so the ransoms themselves have been increasing. The ransom payments from Q3 of 2019 were on average $42,000. And in Q1 of 2020, that's jumped up $70,000 up to $112,000 is the average ransom payment now.
And the volume has increased as well.
Yes, the volume of attacks have increased by 25% from Q4 of 2019. And then right when we're going into COVID in Q1 of 2020, it just is increased by 25%. So the ransomware attacks aren't slowing down, and they're only going to continue to increase. And it's been, like we said earlier, it was proved to be a lucrative means to do this. So more and more criminals are doing this.
So one of the
differences is also the skill set required to run these attacks has shifted. It's not the ransomware authors that are running these attacks. Instead, they've gone into the franchise business. And you have franchisees, we call them affiliates, who are doing the ransomware attacks.
So that's also called ransomware as a service, I believe.
Exactly. And that was what my first blog post was actually on. And ransomware as a service is a new business model, like Tim mentioned, that allows the ransomware developers to lower their risk because they're not actually the ones doing the attacks anymore. They're either selling the ransomware or leasing it out to these different attackers. And the attackers are growing because they no longer have to develop their own ransomware to perform these attacks.
They use
a scary blog post for me to read because I'm thinking we're kind of entering into this dystopian future, where people that it's bad enough when people with high technical capability, sort of turn their skills into this kind of criminality, but making this now available to people that don't have that level of technical skill. This is something I think, businesses and organizations need to be paying a lot of attention to if they're not already.
And we've seen this kind of evolution before. The initial distributed denial of service attacks were done by high caliber, high technical knowledge people. And then they developed a tool set and your average high school student could run it. So it greatly decreased the level of technical sophistication required. In terms of spam, the initial spams were put together by people who really knew how the email system worked and how to tweak it to cause things to happen. And then they packaged it. And now it's being run very, very broadly for pharmacological spam, for fraudulent spam, things like that. So it's happening again. That same sort of evolution is happening again with ransomware.
And it's already known that ransomware utilizes prefabricated exploit kits. So the exploit kits are like basically how they get into the network, and then they don't have to develop the ransomware. It's already made for them too. So they just deploy it on the network, and it's just bad news for an organization.
Yeah. So I'm going to take it back to spam. When spam originally came out, I know I was one of the many people that was ready to throw my laptop through the window with all the spam stuff that I had to filter out. But IT organizations, people that are paying attention to this, like CERT, found strategies for preventing spam and, filtering as a big mechanism and filtering at different boundary layers and things like that. So that now I get annoyed once in a while, but really in most end users' daily work, spam is not a defining element of their interaction with the email system. So are we kind of going in that direction with the solutions to ransomware? I know that FBI, and others don't support paying ransom, but what are we able to help organizations with so that they don't have to pay the ransom, so they don't have to be faced with that decision to either prevent a ransomware attack or respond once it's been executed?
Well, recognize that paying the ransom is usually a bad idea. Okay, one, you're rewarding the criminals, and that which you reward, you get more of. So you're just adding to their cash flow and giving them more capability. Two, about 60% of the time that an organization pays the ransom, they either don't get back anything in terms of a decryption key, or the decryption key that they get back doesn't work. So they pay the money and they get nothing for it about 60% of the time. And there's a variety of different studies that lead to that 60% figure. So it's better to be thinking more in advance and prepping your own solution rather than depending upon the criminals, which kind of makes sense. I mean, what's the criminal's investigation? In addition, even if the decryption works, the criminals make no guarantee that they won't turn around and hit you again. So the average organization that gets hit about 3 times within the calendar year with ransomware attacks. So, it's really bad news to be paying off the ransom. And matter of fact, adding to the bad news, the Department of the Treasury is now proposing a set of sanctions against organizations that pay ransom, particularly within the financial industry. So you not only could get hit by having to pay the ransom and putting all the effort into trying to secure your systems, you got to pay a penalty to the government related to it.
And to tie onto that, there's new behaviors with the ransomware for data exfiltration. So you can be hit for fines if you have sensitive, like personal identifiable information or credit card numbers. You can be hit by fines for that too. Or now, if you pay the ransom to get that data back, you could also be hit by a fine for that. So you need to take new strategies to protect your sensitive data.
Marisa, do you want to explain to those who may not know what data exfiltration is and how it relates to ransomware?
So basically, before the ransomware attackers go into the network and encrypt all the data, they're going in and they're actually downloading and stealing information off the databases and wherever they can get their hands on. So in November of 2019, they actually did this to Alliance Universal, and they told them, like, hey, we stole some of your data and we're going to publish it unless you pay the ransom. And Alliance Universal did not pay the ransom, and they ended up publishing 700 megabytes of the data online. And it's only continued with even more ransomware variants are adapting this to their strategies, and it's becoming more and more common.
Maze actually has a name and shame website that they've set up just strictly for these are the organizations we've hit. This is their critical data. They didn't pay the ransom. Here you go.
Wow. And here we are. So, I mean, one of the obvious strategies is make sure you have, backups of your data so that somewhere else, so that, if someone does get access to your data, you're not completely eliminated from accessing it. But what are some of the other strategies that we recommend to organizations? If they're listening, hopefully, if they haven't already engaged in a ransomware strategy, they will be motivated to do so. So what are some things that they should be paying attention to?
Well, one of the things that you need to be aware of is the ransomware attackers know that organizations cut backups. And so they will target the backups first because the data is already gathered there for them to download. So you need to, first of all, secure your backups. Make sure that you've backed up good data, and as much as possible, use malware checkers or antivirus solutions or consistency checkers to make sure that what you're backing up is proper. And then encrypt the data yourself so that even if they download it, they can't publish it.
Okay. Use their strategy against them. I like that.
There are several characteristic ways that attackers get into organizations to plant malware. And the main one is the wide open front door, which is email. So the more you can do to spoil the phishing, if you will, make it so that people are less likely to click the links, the more robust your organization is going to be. And that includes informing your people that, hey, we are likely to be targeted because watch out for this, watch out for that, watch out for this, and come up with very bulleted points that deal with protection of your critical information. And also test your people after you've given them this training. Maybe not right away, maybe a week or so later. Run a phishing test against your organization and see who does click the link. And then cycle those people back into further feedback and further understanding of, hey, we explained to you you shouldn't click the link, and then we turned around and you clicked the link.
Another one of the main attack vectors is RDP, and a good strategy just in general is to minimize your organization's attack surface. So like all the stuff they have internet facing, try to minimize that. If you don't need services, turn them off. If you're not using ports, block them on your firewall. Just minimizing that, it just lessens the opportunity of attackers being able to get into your network.
So reduce the opportunity on the front side. A couple of things you've talked about there. Reduce opportunity on the back side by protecting your data. And I think I saw in one of your blog posts, a statement about any data that you can think of that you would not want to be published on an external website, you probably want to encrypt. And I think that's a nice rule of thumb for, getting people more sensitized to, it's not just about losing access to the data, but some of the fines, and not just the fines, the loss of reputation associated with, hey, my data isn't safe with you guys, is something that organizations want to avoid. Are there any other sort of big themes in terms of things that people should be watching out for, either on prevention or recovery?
Well, those are basically we call them the kind of the table stakes techniques, which is if you really want to be able to stand your own against malware, that's at least the base level for trying to deal with them. Then you have the more specific things that are geared around your critical assets. And that, as Marisa commented, involves making sure that you're managing your attack surface, and particularly around your very most critical assets. Marisa, do you want to kind of highlight some of the points there? Because that was your part of your blog post.
Yes. So besides the phishing and the backups, 3 other things that you should consider are reducing your attack surface, as I mentioned before, turning off services, blocking ports, and then you want to try doing a layered approach. So you want to use firewalls to block those ports. You want to use host firewalls to block ports. You also want to use antivirus, as Tim mentioned. And the last one is if they actually do get on your network, then that's when you need to make sure you have those valid backups, and you also have encrypted your sensitive information. Because like you said, if you're thinking, I would consider paying the ransom for this data, then you should just encrypt it, and then you'll have peace of mind.
So,
and then going beyond that, there's methods where, for example, you can apply deception on your network. Set up false servers that the attackers that are much more exposed than the real ones that the attackers might want to go after, and use those for, one, knowledge that an attack is going on without losing data, and 2, profile the attackers pretty definitely. These are the vulnerabilities they're going for. These are the services they're exploiting. This is the phraseology in the email messages that they're sending. Be able to gather that kind of data so that you can offer very specific warnings to your people, so that you can make sure that you're hardening your network against the specific methods being used. So there again, this is more investment, more effort. But if you really are very concerned about this threat and the large financial costs that could be associated, it may very well be worth it. And there have been some very, very high-profile cases where ransomware got involved. For example, a subsidiary of FedEx in Europe got infected through a supply chain risk. And it took FedEx Europe down for several weeks. They actually had to end up passing business to competitors to try and deal with the problem. It was a mess and very costly.
So the SEI, as most of our viewers already know, we're a federally funded research and development center. So we are one of those places that gathers information about profiles, things like that. We're we call ourselves an honest broker. We try and anticipate and solve some of these problems, convey them not only to the government, but to the public in terms of how to, which is exactly what we're doing here. What are some of the things that we're doing? What are the projects and resources that we have to offer our audience in terms of either participating in our work, in our projects on this, or just resources that we have available that they can access?
So recently, both Tim and I have published separate technical reports talking about ransomware. My report was on just like the current ransomware threats, the top 10 ransomware variants that were active in the past 2 years. And Tim, you can explain yours.
My report was looking at the NIST's CIF, cybersecurity framework, CSF, cybersecurity framework, and then using the methods from the CSF specifically against ransomware. So what's going to be done in terms of protect, what's going to in terms of prevent, what's going to be done in terms of recognize, respond, using the CSF methods.
Yeah, the NIST CFS methods and my technical report just is a deep dive of ransomware and anything you could want and different responses you could take. But then we both wrote blog posts about this, and I wrote one on ransomware as a service threats. The second one, I believe, Tim covered his C acronym, which is spoil the phishing. I forget the
ensure good backups and encrypt data.
And then the final blog post, which hasn't been published yet, is just talking about more defense strategies that you can do, which are reducing your attack surface. It's also layering your security, and then finally encrypting your sensitive data. And yeah, there's a lot of the blog posts I think are pretty great because it touches on stuff we at the SEI do, and it also has other external sources. So you kind of can determine how deep you want to go.
Yeah, and these aren't the first blog posts that have been done on ransomware. Several of the research groups here at the SEI have done posts on ransomware, but we're just continuing to try and keep abreast of this threat and provide timely information about the threat and how to respond to it.
Well, and this is one of those ones that we have seen evolution, and as long as we are seeing continuing evolution and use of these kinds of malware strategies, we're going to keep tracking it and keep working on it because we want to protect, the data of the organizations that are serving in lots of different capacities, our citizens and stakeholders all over the world. So what are you thinking about next? What's the sort of research direction that you're following? And do you want to say anything about how you see ransomware evolving? What are some things that are sort of on the cusp of emerging that you might want to bring forward to some of our viewers?
So I am considering writing a blog post just touching on basic incident response to ransomware. That hasn't been completely determined yet, but that's something that I'm considering pursuing. And just tips that your organization can do to help make the process smoother.
I'm interested in working with organizations that are leveraging the cloud and developing and probably authoring a blog post on what solutions specifically help to protect your cloud-based assets. There are some big advantages to the cloud in terms of cost and that. There are some costs associated with the cloud, particularly in the area of awareness, how you track what's going on against your cloud-based resources is often difficult, and being able to provide some more specific guidance there is probably going to be worthwhile. We're going to see the attackers.
An advantage, but also a disadvantage in this case.
We're going to see the attackers continue to innovate. Let's face it, the money's there. They're harvesting so much of the dollar amount there that they're highly motivated to continue to innovate to make their attacks even more costly and effective. They're going to be starting to try and go against even encrypted data, largely by going after endpoints. So they're going to try and hit someplace that has authorized access to data that's otherwise encrypted. And so, moving more towards not just storage-based solutions, but endpoint-based solutions is probably something they're going to do, and something that we need to pay attention to. A lot of the network defenses that we have in place have largely been border or server-based defenses. And now we're going to have to start suddenly paying more attention to workstation-based defenses or other sorts of attacks at that point. In addition, I would expect that attackers are going to look for places where data already exists and is congregated. So common storing solutions using network storage options such as OneDrive or Box or Google Cloud or things like that. So they're going to look at what solutions work for organizations that are using these types of systems and how they can easily extract the data out surreptitiously. And finally, you can expect them to continue to innovate in terms of how they get people to click their links. They're going to continue to try and move things forward so that when you're getting a message that gives them access, there's nothing in the message that triggers your alarm and says, oh, wait, this one's bad. In fact, it looks very, very good. It looks normal. Now, I'm getting an email from Marisa. Marisa says, hey, check out this file. Okay, I'd probably click the link. So being able to get more detailed understanding of organizations and how to couch more direct attacks to make them more effective, that's probably a direction that the attackers are going to go, which means we as defenders have to be more alert as to what are the evidence that this really doesn't come from Marisa. It comes from J Evil person that's out there. So there is a lot of interesting work in this area, and it just remains to be seen how things evolve.
Which means that we are going to continue to pay attention to it, and you guys are going to keep writing blog posts and reports to help people understand what they can do, and as these threats evolve, we'll be there to help people understand how to mitigate those. So that's what we do. And I want to thank you both for doing this interview. Remote is always harder, but we're getting the hang of it. But thank you for talking about this work. I think it's very important if you are a viewer who is just kind of coming into the ransomware arena, pay attention, because this is not going away. So to all of our listeners, we mentioned some technical reports and other blogs. All of those links will be in our transcript. And we do that for all the resources that we mentioned in a podcast. So thank you for joining us today. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to access us at info@sei.cmu.edu. And we hope that you will get this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for viewing.
Thanks for joining us. This episode is available where you download podcasts, including SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. It is also available on the SEI website at sei.cmu.edu/podcasts and the SEI's YouTube channel. This copyrighted work is made available through the Software Engineering Institute, a federally funded research and development center sponsored by the U.S. Department of Defense. For more information about the SEI and this work, please visit www.sei.cmu.edu. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us at info@sei.cmu.edu. Thank you.